Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Join me as I empty out my freezer and try to cook as many meals as I can with minimal grocery shopping. This is a great way to save money and prevent food waste. I'm going to show you how I write down my freezer inventory and the process of how I come up with meals to cook. Once this is finished, I will show you some recipes as I cook off my inventory list I created. I started off with a freezer inventory sheet. Here is a close-up of the one I made. I wanted to print off a more organized sheet, but I didn't get a chance to. This one isn't fancy, but it got the job done. The sheet is simple. All I did was create a few columns on a blank piece of paper. I had a column for meat, vegetables, fruit, and etc. I would just take an item out of the freezer and write it down in the column that best represented the item. Here is a picture I took showing you what was in my freezer. Once I have all my ingredients written down, I sit down and think of some meals that I could cook with each item. For instance, I have ham, spinach, and a frozen homemade crust I made a month ago. This would make a perfect quiche, which my husband loves, so I will make this on one of his days off for a late brunch. Next, I saw that I had tortillas and a whole bag of potatoes I bought before going out of town that I really needed to use up ASAP, along with breakfast sausage that I had in the freezer. I can make breakfast burritos. Breakfast burritos have such a special place in my heart. My dad always made them for special occasions or holidays, so they take me back to my childhood every time I have them. I need some lunch ideas, and I figured that shredded chicken that I used to make bone broth last month would make a perfect chicken salad. I make my own sourdough bread, which I will tag at the end of this video. It is the easiest sour bread recipe you can make. I make it weekly in my house since we go through it quickly. Since I needed to use the rest of the potatoes, I need another recipe. I figured I would make au gratin potatoes, but I would add the Polish sausage into it to make it more of a meal instead of a side. There is also some crab meat in the fridge that I could either make a crab salad out of or make a crab sushi roll. I will see how I am feeling the day I decide to use the crab meat. Next, I had some portions of frozen chicken that I needed to find some recipes for, along with the mahi-mahi fish that was also in my freezer. I just went on the internet and did a quick search of mahi-mahi and chicken marinade recipes until I found some that looked decent. I tried to find chicken marinade that included ingredients that I had on hand or used similar ingredients, so I wouldn't have to buy too much groceries at the store. I also decided to do cabbage two ways. One cabbage is too much for my family for a single meal, so I will split the cabbage in half and cook it two ways. One portion will be fried cabbage with onions and ham. The other I will make egg roll in a bowl, where I can also use the ground pork that is in my freezer. Fruits were easy since there's only a few things that I can make with each ingredient that I'm familiar with. The items on the far bottom right column is the items I need to add to my grocery list that I am missing for me to cook the meals. The etc. column is mostly used by my daughter as quick meals or odds and ends that I keep in the freezer, like my frozen bag of veggie scraps that I used to make stocks, which I really need to do again soon. I am out of beef broth. We will start off our freezer meals with the au gratin potatoes. This is the meal my husband wanted first on the list. You're going to start off by rinsing off your potatoes and slicing them thinly. I started hand slicing but got lazy and pulled out my food processor. I am glad I did because it saved me a lot of time. Next, I am going to chop up an onion and add it to the pot. I found a recipe online similar to what I'm doing here. I usually just use a recipe as a guideline. I will ad-lib ingredients and change the measurements based off my family's taste. The recipe I found online didn't call for any green peppers, and I had one sitting on the counter that was going to go bad here shortly, so I decided to add it in. I'm glad I did because that really elevated the flavor and gave it a nice kick. After chopping up the onions, I cut up that green pepper. I'm thinking my green pepper germinated with my poblano pepper because it had a slight poblano taste to it, but it was shaped like a bell pepper, which is fine. That pepper tasted great in this dish. Once the pepper is sliced, you want to add the pepper into the pot with the onions and add some butter. I added 1 stick of butter and sauteed the onions and peppers until they were soft. Once the onions and peppers are soft, I added 1 tablespoon of garlic, 1 tablespoon of black pepper, and 2 teaspoons of salt. I just mix it well until it's evenly combined in the butter. You want to add your spices to the hot fat like butter or oil to help bring out more of the spice flavor into your food. Next, you want to add half a cup of flour to create a roux. This will help thicken up the cheese sauce we're about to make. You just want to cook this for a few minutes to get rid of that raw flour taste. Now we can finish up our cheese sauce. I added about 1 cup of milk into the butter mixture. You don't want it too thick now since the cheese will thicken it up some more when it melts. I usually use whole milk for cooking, but my store was sold out, so I'm just going to use 2% here. But I do recommend whole milk. I ended up losing my spoon here as it fell into the mixture, and I was forced to dirty up a second spoon. Now you just want to crumble any cheese you have on hand. The recipe calls for Swiss cheese, but I only had mozzarella, so I used that, and it still came out great. You want to add enough to make it smooth and cheesy. If it is too thick, you can add more milk like I had to do it for a few times. If you add too much milk, then you can add more cheese or let it simmer to reduce some. Once you get it to a good consistency, you want to add about 1 teaspoon of Dijon mustard. This gave the cheese sauce a nice zip to it and made it feel more Polish to me. The cheese sauce was a little bland for me, so I added more spices. About another tablespoon of pepper and garlic and another teaspoon of salt. Once your cheese sauce is done, you want to put this on a low heat to prevent the cheese from browning on the bottom. Now we need to cut up the sausage that I had in the freezer. I only had half the sausage in there, so I chopped it up very finely, and also since my toddler is eating this, hot dogs and sausages are a choking hazard if left too big. Cutting meat into smaller portions will make the food stretch out more in the dish. Now we can start assembling our dish by greasing our casserole dish. I use butter this time, but you can use whatever you have on hand. We're going to do a layering system. First we add the cheese and spread it well to cover the whole bottom of the pan. Then we will lay a layer of potatoes on top, and then a layer of sausage on top of the potatoes. We will repeat this layer several times until you used up all the ingredients. I got lazy halfway through and just dumped the rest of my potatoes in, and the remaining sausage and sauce on top. The potatoes had a problem cooking in the oven when I did this, so I had to cook it twice as long. I don't recommend this. Don't do what I did and take your time and do as many layers as you can here. Should have done 4 to 5 layers versus just the 3 that I did. My biggest problem when I cook is I take shortcuts for time management, and sometimes I probably shouldn't, and this was one of those examples. I decided to cut up more potatoes. The casserole dish didn't look very full to me, and I wanted to try to make enough to feed us for lunch, give my husband lunch, and feed us for dinner. Once you finish your last layer of potatoes, you want to pour the rest of your sauce on top of the potatoes, and top the potatoes with extra cheese. I only had mozzarella in our fridge, so I just poured that over the top until I had a nice thin layer over the potatoes. I then baked it in a preheated oven for 350 degrees for an hour and a half. The recipe called for 45 to 60 minutes, but my potatoes weren't done by that time, probably because I clumped my potatoes too much on my final layer, so I cooked it until my potatoes were soft. Now that the dish is in the oven, I can pull out my freezer meal plan list and cross out scalloped potatoes that I just cooked. It was actually all gratin potatoes since we added cheese to it, but we always just called the dish with and without cheese the same thing, which is scalloped potatoes in our house. I also need to cross out the Polish sausage that I used up. Here's the dish when I pulled it out of the oven. It tasted amazing and my husband loved it. I will definitely make this again for a side dish for a holiday. It was easy to make, and I could make it ahead of time and place it in the fridge and cook it the next day. The next meal we are going to make is breakfast burritos. I just washed up the rest of the potatoes that I had in the house that were going bad. I made too much potatoes for this recipe, but these potatoes will make a great side dish, so these potatoes will be used in 3 different meals. I just want to dice the potatoes in bite-sized pieces and place them in a large skillet. You want to use a pan that has a lot of surface area, so you can brown as much of the potatoes as you can. Once you're done with your potatoes, you want to place half a stick of butter into the skillet and cook the potatoes on medium-low. These potatoes take about 45 minutes to cook properly. You want a nice low heat and a slow cooking time to get the best flavor from these potatoes. Next, we'll add half a tablespoon of salt and pepper on top of the potatoes. Potatoes need a decent amount of salt and pepper, so don't be afraid to add extra. Right before your potatoes start to brown, you want to add your white onions into the potatoes. I added mine a little late since I was on the phone with my mom. Now you just want the onions and potatoes to get more color. While we are waiting on this step, you want to go ahead and get the sausage going. I usually use homemade sausage, but I bought some a few months ago when my grocery store was out of pork butts that I usually grind up. It'll be nice to have this out of my freezer. I try not to buy too many pre-packaged foods since I'm worried about the ingredients nowadays. Plus, homemade is always better. You just want to simmer the breakfast sausage until it starts to get crispy. The crispy pieces are always the best part. I'm going to go ahead and pull out my freezer meal plan sheet and cross out the breakfast burritos, the sausage, and the tortillas. This recipe crossed out 2 of the foods I had taking up space in my freezer, and I used up some old potatoes. I hate food waste, and I always feel accomplished when I get creative to prevent wasting food. Here is a close-up of the sausage. Most people will say this is done, but please let it cook more until it starts to actually fry. This will change the flavor and add texture to the sausage. It will make the burritos taste so much better. Now you want to add 3 to 4 scrambled eggs over the potatoes. Don't stir the potatoes yet. You want the egg mixture to cook for a few seconds, or you won't have egg pieces in there. Now that the sausage has cooked more, it looks so much better. You can see how the sausage has a darker color than before. After about a minute, you want to slowly stir the potatoes to make sure the eggs are evenly cooked in the potatoes. You can see the nice big pieces of eggs in the potatoes. This is what you want. If you stir too soon, then the eggs get lost in the potatoes and you won't have yummy egg bites. The last step is warming up the tortillas. I just stick them in the microwave for 30 seconds on a plate. Warm tortillas fold easier and they're supposed to be cooked before serving. You could warm them on the skillet, but a microwave works too. I'm just going to cut up my toddler's tortilla into bite-sized pieces here. I am just going to add some potatoes and sausage on her little tray here. I try to feed her whatever my husband and I are eating. Sometimes she won't eat everything, but I still want to offer her the choice, so she gets used to other foods. I didn't think she would eat the sausage, but she actually did. Next is my husband's plate. He likes hot sauce on his breakfast burritos. You can add cheese, sour cream, whatever your family loves. I like mine plain. It is how my dad used to cook them and serve them to us when I was little. Of course, his always tasted 100% better than mine for some odd reason. The next recipe I'm going to make is tandoori chicken. This is a new recipe for me. I've never even made tandoori chicken before, and it was very easy and tasty. This will go into our routine chicken marinade from now on. Next time I will double my seasoning here though. You're going to start off with 1 cup of Greek yogurt. The recipe said to juice 1 lime, but I had some lemon juice in the freezer. I buy a big bag of lemon and I zest and juice all of them to keep them in the freezer. The rinds I make homemade cleaner out of. I am getting low and will need to do that again soon, and I will post a video of how I do that. Next we will add 1 garlic clove. I am out of garlic, so I just used minced here. The recipe also calls for freshly grated ginger, but I bought the tube since my store is out of ginger. We live in the country and really only have a Walmart here. Next we will add 1 teaspoon of garam masala, half a teaspoon of ground turmeric, half a teaspoon of salt, and a teaspoon of cayenne flakes. I would recommend doubling these spices if you like more flavor to your chicken. It was good, but only had a hint of the spices in this. Next, we are just going to stir the yogurt until the spices are evenly combined. We will then add the chicken into the yogurt mixture and let the chicken marinate as long as you can. I recommend chicken thighs as they have a higher fat percentage than chicken breast. Chicken breasts dry out easily unless cooked in fat. I only let the chicken marinate for an hour since I had to get lunch going, but the recipe does say overnight is recommended. The recipe says to cook these in the oven, but I love my air fryer, so I decided to use that instead. The air fryer cooks more evenly than my oven. It takes longer to warm up and actually cook the chicken than an air fryer. If you haven't bought one yet, then I highly recommend it. You could easily cook a whole meal in these if you're only cooking for 1 person. You just want to lay the chicken into the air fryer and try not to overcrowd it. Of course, I had 1 piece of chicken left over, so I had to run this one all by itself in the air fryer. I had some broccoli in the fridge that I thought would be a great side for this dish. It was also going bad and it needed to be used up. I am just going to break it into bite-sized pieces and saute it in some butter over the stove. I just added about 1 teaspoon of salt and pepper on top of the broccoli and cooked it on medium heat until they were soft. Here are some of the leftover potatoes that were not used up by the breakfast burrito. They will make a great side dish to our tandoori chicken. I'm going to start off by making my husband's lunch to make sure he has enough to eat tonight. It is time to flip the chicken. They look and smell amazing. They are starting to brown nicely on one side. My husband also wanted toast with his lunch, so I'm going to slice up some homemade sourdough to go along with our dinner. I have a video showing how I made this amazing easy bread, and I'll tag it at the end of this video. Now the chicken is done and it has a nice brown color on both sides. Here's my husband's plate showing everything we make today, and here's my daughter's plate of food. Broccoli and potatoes at the top, chicken and toast at the bottom. She isn't a fan of protein and really only likes carbs. She ate everything but her chicken. That is a toddler for you. I'm hoping she learns to like other things besides bread. I can't leave out the photo of my husband's lunch. He asked that I make it again soon. Now we can cross another dish and ingredients off our freezer meal planner sheet. I can already see a good portion of my freezer starting to free up, and it's making me feel really accomplished. And it's so much easier to move food around in there now. Since I have everything to make the recipe again, I decided to pull out some frozen chicken that I had in a Ziploc bag and add all the ingredients into the bag. I didn't have to look at the recipe since I just made it, and it was easy just to throw it all in the bag. That way next time I can just thaw out the chicken and the marinade together at the same time. It will save me some time in the future, and future Kathleen will be thankful. This tandoori chicken is very easy and will go into my future recipes. I will cook it up more next time I make it and try to add more authentic sides. I'm trying to cook more recipes that are abroad lately, and Indian food is one of my favorites. Lately I've been on a Japan kick and a Korean kick, so it'll be nice to throw some Indian in there as well. The last step is to cross out the meal planning sheet and add the new marinade chicken to the list. That way I know exactly what's in my freezer next time I decide to cook dinner. I hope you enjoyed this video and that this video inspired you to try to use more foods out of your freezer. If you'd like to see more of these freezer videos, then please like and subscribe. Thank you so much for keeping me company in the kitchen for the past few days.